Thomas Glenn is a vet of the Korean War, which was from June 25, 1950 to July 27, 1953. He was born in Santa Monica, California on October 16, 1931. He is an only child and had his parents divorced around 3 years old. His father and 2 uncles served in World War II. Thomas Glenn went to Santa Monica City College and worked at the fish market on the Santa Monica Pier.
Which I had a great life before service because I'm born in Santa Monica and I live on the beach. And if I run low on money before the service, I'd go work for a while until the surf came up, and then I'd get another job or something like that. Across the street from my high school was a city college. This is in Santa Monica. And I was floating around, the in-between. I graduated from high school and just getting by. I was employed enough to eat, was on my own, was not living with anybody but me. So I was struggling, but getting by because it was in Santa Monica. And it's always great in Santa Monica.
Meanwhile, there was trouble going on the other side of the Pacific in Korea. Korea had been part of the Japanese Empire since 1910 until it fell to the Americans and Soviets after World War II. The peninsula was divided in half, with the Russians in the north and the Americans in the south along the 38th parallel. Shortly after, new states were formed. Anti-communist dictator Syngman Rhee ruled the south, and communist dictator Kim Il-sung ruled the north. In May of 1946, it was made illegal to cross the 38th parallel without a permit. The Soviets and China aided North Korea's military, and North Korea crossed the 38th parallel to invade South Korea. This prompted U.S. entry into the conflict because they saw it as an effort to spread communism. After just coming back from World War II 5 years earlier, President Truman compared this invasion to Hitler's 1930s aggressions and did not want the U.S. to make the same mistake again. He announced via radio interview on July 19, 1950, that the U.S. would intervene in the Korean conflict to halt the spread of communism.
My fellow citizens, at noon today, I sent a message to the Congress about the situation in Korea. We have sent land, sea, and air forces to assist in these operations.
The president described the decision to go to war as a police action in cohesion with the United Nations. A U.S.-led United Nations force fought for South Korea, while communist North Korean and Chinese forces fought for the North.
Shortly after, Mr. Glenn was drafted in the Korean War, accompanied by 1,751,819 other draftees, although few actually went to Korea because the United States Army turned away 50% of the potential draftees. But Mr. Glenn did spend a full 2 years serving in Korea and started his training in California.
They taught me everything. Spent about a month and a half in basic training, learning how to be in the service and learning how to eat, Went to basic training, and then I was selected to be in the military police without me volunteering. That's just the selection in my, I don't know, I must have lied on my tests at something like that or something. You go to 2 camps. You go to a camp for basic training, and then you go to a specialty camp if you're in a. So I had to take some pre-stuff to be a military policeman.
Thomas boarded a troop ship in San Francisco and from there sailed to Korea. While in Korea, he worked in railroad security and traveled all over the country. Some of the bases he stayed at were Daejeon and Daegu.
Well, I gained a little rank, as you go up from private to corporal, sergeant, and then if you goof up a little, they take that, they'd knock you down a little bit again. So I was kind of in the middle like that. And, so it was getting my time in and getting back out of the service were my goals. There was nothing nice about it because the country I went to, they needed us there, and the country was devastated. Well, I was in railway security, so they had railways that went so it was all over Korea that was the area I worked in. The company I was in just moved, depending on where the fighting was and how close they could get. So when I went to Korea, it was on the trains and guard them because people over there were extremely hungry, and these trains would have sections of them that were food, and people were very hungry, and the thieves loved to steal food because they could sell it real easy. So I'm on duty for the equivalency of 12 hours a day. And then I get to relax if I'm not working, if I'm not riding a train. But they kept us pretty busy, so that's it. And if you worked about 5 days in a row, you'd get a couple of days off.
During his free time in Korea, Tom played pool and ping pong with his military buddies.
So we're in the Army, you're in a group, you call on and you're gone it takes about 3 days for a round trip. So back, then 2 days to lay around, and then you're gone for another 3 days. So there was no difference between Sunday, Monday, Saturday, anything. All days were the same routines for a military policeman.
Military police had to wear an MP armband around their left arms to distinguish them as the military police. Mr. Glenn had to be on duty as a military policeman for 12 hours, but also had to be ready to go 24 hours a day, as departure times could come at any time. The Korean War moved up and down Korea, devastating the country. 10% of the Korean civilian population died during the war.
Now remember the Koreans, they just had an army that came through them in one direction, and then they go through them again going in the other direction, as they went through that. So they were disrupted at the time, and it was like a devastated war area. And so it was tough on the civilians. I mean, that's the thing. And so, and I could well understand why they would want to steal food and things like that. That's just, normal bringing you're going to eat, the basic in life. So you had to use a judgment, and you stick with your soldier buddies, and that's about it. The country, I got to say a couple words about the country itself. The country was devastated. They had troops that went this way, and they took it way down to the peninsula, right down. Then the army went this way. So anybody caught in between that, the country that's long and narrow, was devastated by war coming through. And it's houses, families are disrupted. The poor people, you feel sorry for them, very sorry for them. When the war goes a two-way, that's tough on the population. So.
In 1951, President Truman started peace talks between the U.S. and Korea. Shortly after, the Korean People's Army and Chinese People's Volunteer Army negotiated with the UN. The fighting still continued because negotiations stalled due to problems with prisoners at war. On July 27, 1953, the Korean Armistice Agreement was set in motion. This agreement stated that both sides withdrew 2 kilometers in the center of the country, called the demilitarized zone.
Well, being I was in railway security, I would run, north and south through the through a lot of the country, and I knew where we were war-wise. It was, you know, where's the front at, you know, so you follow it every day in case you didn't want it to be right next, you know, you didn't want to be where the war was emerging, because it's not a comfortable spot to be in. It's a long country, and there's in that occupation I had, I was exposed to everything, you know.
He was in Korea when the war ended. He returned home on a big boat from Korea back to California.
But I couldn't wait, you know, the minute I left the dock in Korea. I was very happy to come home, extremely happy to come home. Couldn't wait to come home.
Mr. Glenn said he had no problem readjusting to civilian life in America.
It was extremely easy. There was no readjustment at all, because I was drafted in the service. I did not volunteer. You know, I wanted no part of that. You know, 2 years in the Army, and I'm saying, oh, God, let me out of here. You know, and I was born in Santa Monica, spent my life early at the beach. I didn't want any part of the Army, you know. But you keep the right attitude, I guess, and the 2 years went rapidly enough.
Thomas was one of the 43% of the Korean War veterans to use the GI education bill. The bill allows veterans to cover costs associated with getting an education. Thomas used the money to attend USC.
It helped pay my tuition and got me through college. The GI Bill, now that's after service, so that was a good deal. I was able to go to USC, which was my favorite college as I grew up, and I couldn't afford it then on my non-working salary. War is war, and it's two people don't like one another, two countries don't like one another, and they have war, and it kills people. There's lucky ones that are always smiling, you know, and they're happy, and there's dead ones, and it's a terrible way to. If you're a civilian, it's a terrible. You know. So the service had no bearing. It's compared to the poor people that had to evacuate. They're coming, then they go back, and then it's back and forth, and so it's hard times on the civilians, and that's what all war zones are like. So it's a pleasure, really a pleasure to get out.
Even though the Korean War is also called the Forgotten War, we will never forget the people who served for our country and risked their lives for our nation.